When people talk about DevOps, they talk about 100 different tools. Which of these 100 tools are important to learn in 2022? What is the role Docker, Kubernetes, Terraform, and a lot of other tools play in DevOps? And is DevOps just about tools? Is there more to it? I'm delighted to have Amit Dave as a host for this discussion. Amit has worked for the big four consulting firms, implementing cloud and DevOps in multiple Fortune 500 companies. Let's get started.
Somebody is starting in their DevOps journey without any experience in 2022. So for them, what would you say, what is DevOps?
Amit, if you look at the entire cycle, right? Cloud, DevOps, these are nothing new. We have been deploying applications to production for a long time now, a few decades. And we want to improve the entire process of how we build software, right? We want to make it as efficient as possible. For me, DevOps is just one step in that direction. Whenever we talk about whenever we talk about software development, in my view, there are three very important aspects. One is communication, right? You have different teams which are part of building software, starting from the business team, development, testing, operations. And during the last 3 decades, we slowly started bringing most of these teams together. Initially, we started with Agile, where we tried and we brought the business team, development team, and the testing team together. We said it's a Scrum team. And then today, we want to also bring in the operations team together and so bring them all together into one team. And today we call it DevOps. It's just how we brand things, right? We want to improve communication so that we are building the right product. The second thing that we also want to focus on is actually feedback, right? So we would want to enable quick feedback on anything that we do. So if let's say I'm building a feature, business team wants to know if it's working, if the users like it or not, as quickly as possible. If the entire cycle takes 6 months, they would not be happy. They would want to probably in a couple of weeks, maybe in a month's time, they would want to get immediate feedback.
Yeah,
the same is the case with respect to, let's say, anything that you are developing. If you are a developer, you are committing some code, you don't want to wait for 2 or 3 days to find that your unit tests are failing or some integration test is failing. You'd want to get immediate feedback as well. The third aspect is automation. Obviously, you'd want to do these things as quickly as possible. Building software, deploying it, checking whether it's working, creating new environments, identifying problems in production and solving them. You want to do these as fast as possible. For me, it's all, you are looking at all these three things and you're trying to improve, and we call it whatever we want. Initially, we called it Agile, focused on the communication part of it. Today, we focus more on the technology part of it and call it DevOps. And tomorrow, it might be something else, but it's just another step in the right direction with respect to how we build software.
Right. So, based on what you said, Ranga, is it fair statement to say that Agile was DevOps 1.0?
Perfect. I think for me, I think of it like that because in Agile, we really focused on the communication part of it.
Yeah.
Right. We tried to get the business team, product owner, business analysts. We got the the development team, Scrum. I mean, we have a Scrum team with all these elements, including the testing team as part of it. So they work in cycles, small sprints, and they try and build software. So for me, Agile was DevOps 1.0 in respect to focusing on the initial aspect, I mean, which is communication. And with Agile, we also focused a little bit on continuous integration and continuous deployment. So there was a focus on doing a lot more unit testing, a lot more integration testing, and also a little bit of focus around trying to automate a little bit more. So those were the two elements which were part of Agile. And we saw that that's not sufficient. We would need to bring operations into the mix, because running applications in production is also a very important part. You'd want to be able to identify problems, solve them, give the right priority to issues you're facing in production. You don't want to spend tons of time on trying to identify what the issue is. Having things like distributed tracing would help you to identify where the problem is and fix them fast, right? So yeah, so that's for me, you are right. I would call Agile as DevOps 1.0.
Sure. So if I'm learning DevOps in 2022, is it important also to start with Agile first and then jump into learning DevOps? Will that help, or I can straight away jump into learning DevOps?
Yeah, if you are anywhere on the technical side, I would say directly jump into DevOps, try and understand it. The more you understand it, the better, the more agile you would get, right? So agile is something you would learn as part of a team. As soon as you are part of an experienced team, I think you will be able to understand why they are doing things a certain way. So if you are a developer or a tester, I would really focus on the specific elements of DevOps that are important to you, and then probably as you go as part of the team, you would learn all the other agile practices.
Right, right. So now this naturally leads into my next question is why we need to learn DevOps. What was or what is broken in our current development process that DevOps is helping us to address, and that is why we need to learn DevOps in 2022.
Yeah, I think, as I said, Amit, DevOps is a continuation to where I mean, it's a, for me, DevOps is nothing but a step in improving how we build software. We would want to keep
Right,
improving, right? I mean, so it's just the next step, and that's how we are doing things today. And that's the reason why you have to learn software. Software is not just about code, it's about putting your application to production and having it maintained efficiently in production and solving problems in production efficiently. It's software element. Building software is all about the entire life cycle. So for me, like as a developer or a tester, you need to understand the entire life cycle. It's not sufficient if you write code.
right, right. So the developer's responsibility is writing the code in sprints and then using continuous integration, and post that it's the responsibility of the operations team. How do you foresee that, or it's a collaboration between the developers and the operations that have to work hand in hand?
Yeah, I think it's all about having everybody in a single team, right? DevOps is all about like being part of a single team. Development team needs to understand what are the problems of the operations, what are the challenges they are facing, and they should be able to work with the operations team to solve those problems. It's about giving equal priority to building new features. You want to take a lot of things live, and you should also have
Yeah,
say like same amount of priority to addressing the concerns of the operations team. So your sprint backlog,
right,
if you are doing a proper DevOps team, would be a mix of these two, and you pick
yeah,
up whatever gives you the most value among the things which are in your backlog with respect to everything.
right, right. So now coming into the tools, if I'm a developer, what are the most important tools that I should be focusing on in 2022 to learn DevOps?
Um, I mean, before we get into the tools aspect, probably we'll look at the important practices which are part of DevOps, right? When you
Okay.
look at DevOps, there are multiple different practices. For me, I mean, there are a lot of
Hmm.
them actually, and
Yeah.
actually, there are tons of tools as well. If you look at the entire
Right.
life cycle of software development, probably there are 100, 200 tools which you can fit into the DevOps thing. But
Yeah.
what we will do is focus on the most important ones. What we will do is focusing on the like probably we will talk about few tools and few
Sure.
important practices which are important, right? So for me, the most important practices when it comes to DevOps are number one is continuous integration, right? So like you'd want to be able to build your software continuously, run your unit tests, run your integration tests, so that whenever there's a small bug in your code, you'd want to find that very early, right? So that's number one. Continuous integration, continuous deployment is also important, right? You'd want to be able to deploy the software to the environment and see if there are any problems in deploying the software to a specific environment. So you want to package your software, deploy it to an environment, check if it's working fine or not. That's continuous deployment, continuous delivery. Like there are small
Yeah.
variations between them, but at a high level, they are both the same for me. Right. The next
Yeah.
important thing is as we go more and more towards the cloud, you'd want to build the environment itself automatically, right? I would want to create a test environment, a production environment, a QA environment. I want to automate the creation of the environment completely. I don't want to manually do that. That's what we call as infrastructure as code. I mean, as part
Right.
of infrastructure of code, there are two important things. But at a major level, infrastructure as code is something which is very, very important to understand as part of DevOps. But the most important part of DevOps for me is the operation cycle as well, right? So you'd want to
Right.
be able to automate, have you like automate the, like you want to provide more visibility into what's happening in production. You'd want to be able to identify production problems quicker. You'd want to be able to solve production problems quicker. So those are for me the three important aspects as far as DevOps practices are concerned. And now, like if we get into the tools aspect of DevOps, probably I would start with the continuous integration, continuous deployment.
Yeah.
We probably you would have heard about things like Hudson, Bamboo, Jenkins. We have been doing continuous integration, continuous development for
Yes.
a long time, right? So these are very, very
Yes.
popular tool. If you look at the world today, probably things like Azure DevOps, code build in Google Cloud, or things like code, I mean, like the pipelines in AWS. So these are some of the continuous integration tools which are present. If you look at the infrastructure as code tools, I can classify them into two parts. One is to create the infrastructure. The other one is to configure the infrastructure. So creating the
Right.
infrastructure means provisioning a virtual machine. Like configuring would mean maybe to install a specific software or apply a security patch, things like that, right? So if you look
Right.
at the infrastructure as code part of it, I mean the provisioning part of it, I think Terraform or CloudFormation or AWS
Yeah.
CDK, like these are some of the popular ones. Pulumi is also getting popular enough. So there are cloud specific tools and cloud neutral. Terraform and Pulumi would fit into the cloud neutral part of it, right? And if we go into the operations ambit of it, there are tons of tools, right? I mean, you can kind of list 20, 30, 40 tools which are present. Now, the most difficult part when it comes to learning these tools is to decide where to start, right? I'm talking about so many different tools that the
Correct.
biggest challenge is to decide where do I start? And that's the biggest question that a lot of people have.
Yes.
Like probably we'll go one by one, right? So if you talk about continuous integration, for example, I
Yes.
think one of the best places to start learning continuous integration today is the cloud. A lot of people think continuous integration, I mean, cloud is difficult, but cloud is very, very easy. You can create a free tier account and you can start playing with either Azure DevOps, or you can start playing with something like AWS code pipelines, or you can start playing with something like Google Cloud Code Build. Those are very, very easy to use. I mean, there is a little bit of UI you need to go through to set up something, but you can try and deploy a project and do continuous integration there, right? The second aspect, infrastructure of code as code, is something which is probably a little difficult to learn, right? So about the be able to focus on infrastructure as code as the entire thing, right? So if you want to learn something like Terraform or Pulumi, you need to have a little bit more background into the cloud, understand how to create infrastructure and do that. So if somebody is starting with
Yeah.
DevOps, probably I would advise them to start with continuous integration. And the other aspect I would want to have them focus is containers and container orchestration. So a lot of
Right.
this entire automation cycle is made very, very simple by containers and container
Yeah.
orchestration. So if somebody is today starting with DevOps, I would recommend them to start with Docker, Kubernetes, and then try and understand how to do continuous integration. Those are the three steps I would want them to focus on.
Right. Okay. So what I understand is in 2022, we have to start with cloud, understand Docker, Kubernetes, and then go on building our CI/CD pipeline. In the past, what we were doing is, as you said, Hudson, Bamboo, and Jenkins, all
Yeah,
bits and pieces, pick this, pick that, whichever you like, and then tie it all up together and then run.
exactly.
But now everything is there in cloud. It's a one-stop shop. No matter whichever cloud provider is your preferred one, go there and learn one by one the services for those clouds which are relevant for DevOps.
Absolutely. I think that would be the best way to start. Like do entry level cloud certification. That would be easy to do. Once you do the entry level cloud certification, then
Yeah.
probably you can start with Docker,
Mm-hmm.
learn Kubernetes. Like almost all the cloud providers offer a Kubernetes service. So you can start learning Kubernetes very, very easily. You don't need
Yeah.
to even spend money to learn Kubernetes. The third aspect is continuous integration, continuous deployment. So that also you can actually start learning in the cloud as well. So it makes it very, very easy. You can focus on the concepts rather than the more trivial things.
Right. So what do you foresee for the learners? How important it is to learn the legacy tools if you are learning DevOps in 2020? Do you see like there's no point, they're going to eventually die, or there is still a possibility that they both will coexist, and the learner needs to learn both? What do you foresee there?
Right. I think there would be a mix and match, right? So it would not be like, if you look at Jenkins, a lot of enterprises are still using Jenkins, and
Correct.
it's very, very good. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not complaining that Jenkins is bad. It's really, really good. It served the purpose during the time frame when it was really, really widely used. Today, the number of enterprises which are using Jenkins is going down. But in this transition period, probably you need to learn Jenkins and, for example, Azure DevOps. But once you understand how Azure DevOps works, once you start with Azure DevOps, learn Azure DevOps, then using Jenkins will not be difficult, right? It's like once you understand the concept of continuous integration, if you know how to use Azure DevOps well, I think the skills are easily transferable to the other clouds. I
Right.
mean, to the other places. If you know Terraform, for example, if you know how to do infrastructure as code with Terraform, or if you know how to use CloudFormation, it should be easy to switch your knowledge and learn some other thing which is respect to like which is in the same category, right? So I strongly believe that it's better to pick one,
Right.
master it, be really, really good at it, and then you'd be able to like learn other things easily, right? uh, if I'm starting with infrastructure as code, probably I would start with Terraform, learn it really, really well. And if in my project they're using Pulumi, like later, let's say if I go into a project where they're using Pulumi, it's easy. My skills are easily transferable. So it's about focusing on one thing which is part of a specific practice. So for me, containers and container orchestration are very, very important, because that's where the entire enterprise world is heading. And so you need to learn Docker, Kubernetes. Those are must. Obviously, cloud is also a must, right? Cloud is the thing which makes learning all these easy. So start with the cloud, learn Docker, learn Kubernetes, and probably like after that, try an infrastructure as code tool like Terraform or Pulumi. And after that is when you can focus on other things, right? So it's impossible to learn to be a master of everything. So it's
Correct.
important to pick up specific thing, master it, and you'll be able to transfer your skills to other areas.
Right. Right. So I think you clearly said there a very clear roadmap for the learners to start focusing on. I think focus on one thing and then be a master at that, and those skills are transferable. Right.
Yeah.
So that's pretty
So
much it.
yeah, I mean, if you look at the internet, right? So I can
Yeah.
see DevOps roadmaps which can list 50, 60, 100 tools, right?
Yeah.
Or 100 areas that you need to learn.
Yes.
I mean, those kind of roadmaps are good, but I doubt if somebody can pursue it. Right? If you would want to do everything in there, it's very, very difficult. And that's why it's important to have focus. So try and identify the important one that you need to learn in each area and focus on it and learn that. Right? It's impossible for everybody to be a master at everything. So identify what's the
Correct.
important one and focus on that. So that would be a very, very important that learners should do.
Correct. Correct. Sure, that makes sense. Now moving on to like developers. If I'm a developer currently and my company is going through kind of adoption of DevOps, right? And I don't have time. I need to write the code. So how can, as a developer, I see the value in DevOps?
Absolutely. Right. So most important thing that all developers need to realize is the fact that their job is to not write code. Their job is to add value to the business they are working for,
That's very
right?
important. Please repeat it once more. I think this is gold. Yes,
Yeah,
Ranga.
absolutely.
What
I
is the
mean, like,
responsibility of developers? Please, for our viewers, once more.
yeah, I would probably say I was in the same cycle. Like, if
Yes,
you, like, if I'll tell a younger Ranga the same thing, right? Ranga, don't focus on the code, technology, tools. These are all part of solving a business problem. It's all about the business value which we deliver finally, right? So
correct.
DevOps is something which helps us to deliver business value quicker in a more efficient way.
Yep,
And therefore, everybody in the team should be focused on it. It's DevOps is not something which makes my job difficult. DevOps is something which makes our job more valuable. So that's where I see it. So yeah, exactly.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, kind of roles of a DevOps is still vague in the industry. When you go to job listing, I want to switch to a DevOps oriented role. I see there's like a DevOps engineer is one role. There's something called a platforms engineer as one role, and then there is something called an SRE. So, which role should I enter if I want to get into the DevOps world?
Amit, bye bye. See you. I don't want to answer that. It's too complex a question to answer. Man, see, I
Yeah,
mean, yeah, I mean, the problem is this, right? So there are so many tools that are part of DevOps that it's like different organizations are making use of different set of tools, and they kind of create different, uh, yeah, I mean, different terminology to represent this specific role. I would rather not really worry about it. One thing I would really want to focus on is the fact that it's impossible for somebody to be good at everything, right? We talked about, when it comes to DevOps, we talked about T-shaped skills, right?
yeah,
You are good at something in depth, but you have a broad knowledge of something. So if you are a developer, you are definitely good at writing code, building efficient applications, designing really well, and you have good knowledge of what's happening around your application with respect to operations, how it's happening. You might not be an expert on every tool which is used in operations, but you have a high level overview of it. It's the same like full stack development, right? If you are a full stack developer, I don't think it's possible to be an expert at back end, front end, and be able to design everything wonderfully well. You would be a specialist in one area. Probably you'd be really good at the back end,
right.
and you will be kind of a generalist in the rest of the areas. You would have probably good enough skills to get things going with respect to front end. So that's how I see it, right? So you need to focus on specific areas. Probably if you're good at Docker and Kubernetes, that's a
Yeah,
really good starting point, right? You don't need to be an expert at Terraform, but you need to understand how Terraform works, have a high level overview of the whole thing. So that's how I see it. You cannot master everything. You have to be specialized in certain things, have a generic knowledge.
right. So, is it something that a developer will also play some part of their responsibilities in doing DevOps activities during the day-to-day job?
Yeah. So
There's
the, I
nothing
mean,
called a dedicated DevOps person.
absolutely. It's like I would say there would be somebody called a developer person. I mean, there would be somebody called a developer. There would be somebody called operations team.
Yeah,
But the roles are not separate. It's not like you throw it away and
yeah,
somebody picks it up, right? So there is the intersection of the roles between what a developer does and within the operations team does. So that the intersection is where is the general skills come into picture. You need to understand
right.
how operations are done, and also another aspect is communication, right? You need to have the right
Right.
importance to, if the production is burning, you don't want to focus on building a new feature, right? That's not what
Yes,
you want to do. So you need to understand what are the challenges of operations team and give the right priority to them.
sure. So now I want to wear my QA hat on and want to know from you, if I'm a QA and I'm wanting to learn DevOps, my next project is on DevOps. So what are the tools as a QA person I need to focus in 2022?
Yeah, I think as far as the QA team is concerned, having a high level overview of DevOps is very important. Understand what's happening throughout the life cycle. How are we adding value to the final customer? Having a big overview of the entire process, how development team works, how the operations team works. Having a high level overview of all the tools which are used is important. Broad perspective, right? It's they don't need to know every tool, but they need to have a high level picture. But the main place where they can add value is trying to automate all the testing that they do. So if there are any test cases that they're building, and if you're doing them manually, I think that's the place where they would need to focus on. Try and automate as many tests as possible, system tests, integration tests, UAT tests, whatever tests they are doing, it's important to focus on automation, right? So some of the popular frameworks are probably around Selenium, right? So those are some of the aspects that testers can focus on, in addition to having a high level overview of the entire process. Obviously, a testing team is really expected to have really good business knowledge, right? So that's a given. So other than that, these would be the skills I would focus on.
Right. So if I have, without DevOps, if I have my automation tests in place, can I bring them into the DevOps world and then incorporate with my pipeline and CI/CD things? Uh,
Absolutely, absolutely. I think building unit tests, if I have a very
yeah,
bad architecture with, like, if I have a bad application with a bad architecture, tightly coupled design, probably adding unit tests might be a difficult thing. Because if you want to write unit tests, code has to be loosely coupled, and probably you have to refactor the code, try to work out how to structure the code so that you can write a unit test. And when you refactor, there's a chance that you introduce bugs, new bugs. So yeah, it's a tighter rope to walk. But when it comes to system tests, when it comes to UAT tests, those are the best places to start with respect to your automation tests, right? Because they are not related to the code, they are related to the entire system as a whole. So that's the best place to start. If somebody is not having any automation testing in their projects, probably I think the best thing that I would recommend them to do is to start with identifying the 10 most basic business critical use cases which you don't want to break, or 10 most critical business flows you don't want to break, and trying to automate them. So start with that and probably add few more. And over a period of time, probably you can improve the code so that you can add unit tests. So that's the kind of journey I would recommend.
sure. No, makes sense, definitely. Now, we covered the developer aspect, we covered the tester. Let's cover the person in between these two, who is a business analyst, right? That's a very tricky role. That person doesn't write the code, doesn't write test cases. Do they still need to learn DevOps?
I think when it comes to a business person, if enterprise is making use of the cloud, I think it's good
Yeah,
to have a starting, like, basic knowledge of the cloud, like
yeah,
having a high level knowledge of the cloud and how it works, and also having a high level understanding of the different tools which are part of the process would be good, right? I think one aspect where we are doing really, really well today is with respect to the cloud certifications, right? If you look at most of the beginner level cloud certifications, I think they give you sufficient technical knowledge
yeah,
to be good in a project. So
yeah,
probably I think if there's a business analyst or a project manager, I would definitely recommend them to start with a basic cloud certification. If they're making use of AWS or Azure or Google Cloud,
yeah.
doing a basic certification on the cloud would give them most of the technical knowledge they would want around like cloud, around containers, container orchestration. Like having a high level overview is very, very important.
No, definitely I agree with you. So, like, personally as a BA, it helps them to talk the same language and understand the languages of the developers.
Absolutely.
So probably they need to kind of be hands-on into the DevOps world as well, and probably the stories which the BAs write. Uh, if they use that particular keywords, that would make more sense to the developers eventually, and the eventual output of the software would be perfectly aligned, I think.
Exactly. And also, I mean, it's like speaking the same language, right? We would want to
Yes.
speak the same language. Basic cloud certification helps us to have a basic language to communicate technically. I think that there's a lot of value there. More than certification itself, the certification, I mean, Azure fundamentals, or like a Google Cloud Digital Cloud Leader, or a cloud practitioner certification. By itself, the certification does not have any value for me, but the knowledge you gain through that,
Yeah.
I think that has a
Agree.
lot of value.
Agree. Sure. Sure. So, is there like a minimum experience? I'm a fresher, for example, and I want to learn DevOps. How hard it is for me?
Yeah, I think DevOps is easy, but the difficult part is being good at what you do. If you are a
Right.
programmer, being good at programming, being good at design, being good at developing web applications or full stack applications, designing good REST API, those are the challenging parts, right? If you are good at that, learning DevOps is easy, right? The same, being a good tester is difficult.
Right.
Identifying the right business scenarios, those are the difficult parts. Learning the basics of cloud, automation testing is difficult to learn. If you are a tester, I think learning a little bit of programming and doing automation testing is not easy. But that's, I think, a skill which would take you to the next level as a tester. So yeah, it's like if you are a developer, if you are good at code, probably DevOps is not so easy. Not, I mean, probably DevOps is easy. But if you are a tester, if you are writing manual tests, learning automation testing might be a much bigger challenge.
Right. Right. So then it kind of connects back to the earlier point which you made. We need to develop like T-shaped skills where you have a primary skill set, and
Yeah.
then DevOps is a perfect match as your secondary skill set, but it is a must have. It's not an optional in today's evolving world where every company is doing digital transformation, and
Yeah.
DevOps and Agile kind of goes hand in hand.
No, we have. I mean, we use a lot of big terminology like digital transformation and things like that. But it's all process of uh, how we can add value very
Yep.
very quickly,
Yep.
right? It's all process of improvements in how we build software. So yeah, it's continuous. I mean, for me, I don't see it as a one step thing. It's more of a thing which keeps keeps going on, and that's why we keep hearing a lot of new terminology when it comes to software.
Awesome. I think we've covered most of the topics for today's session, and I believe a new person who wants to enter the DevOps world in 2022 would get a lot of value. So thank you very much, Ranga, for your time.
Thanks a lot, Amit, for hosting us. For learners, if you have any other questions which we have not answered as part of the video, please post them in the comments. I and Amit would we'll look at the comments. We'll also identify the right ones, and we'll also create videos where we answer your questions. So if there are any questions that we did not answer as part of the video, we would love to have your feedback and we would want to hear from you.